Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 9th memorial lecture in memory of Dr. M.V. Nadkarni. Today we are very happy that we have Mrs. Nadkarni here with us. The last couple of years she was not able to come, but this time she felt she must really make a point of being here for the memorial lecture. So it's a great joy to have her here with us. And all of you, all the familiar faces and some new faces also. So this time the speaker is Dr. Larry Seidlitz, who's been connected with Savitri Bhavan for quite many years. And he's chosen to talk about lines from Savitri. Love, the truth that saves. Before we ask him to speak, we'll have a few moments concentration. Please.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Shraddhavan, for inviting me to speak on this special occasion in memory of Dr. Nadkarni, who was a great devotee and exponent of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's teachings, and a great orator of Savitri. He had a wonderful voice. I had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Nadkarni, having attended a workshop that he led in the United States on Savitri, and also listening to him at various events in Pondicherry. Recently, I had the honor of editing a series of talks that he gave on Savitri in 1995, and which is being published by the Sri Aurobindo Society and will be coming out very soon. It was very inspiring to listen to the recordings of his talks and to hear his views and comments on the poem. And I'm happy that his many insights and reflections on Savitri will become widely available through this book. I'm also very happy and grateful that Mrs. Nadkarni was able to join us today. I would also like to thank Shraddhavan for her many years of dedicated service to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and especially for her great love and devotion and scholarship related to Savitri. I've benefited immensely from her books on Savitri and by attending her Sunday morning classes on Savitri over quite a few years. I would also like to express my appreciation to Helmut, who has created this beautiful center for the study and enjoyment of Savitri and for the spiritual enrichment and development of Auroville and all those who come here. And I'd also like to thank Prasad and Margaret and all the others whose dedicated work for Savitri Bhavan has made it not only function, but also thrive and grow. And finally, I give thanks to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, who have given me so many blessings and have practically carried me through life to arrive at this moment. Thanks for giving me this wonderful opportunity to speak about Sri Aurobindo's great masterpiece of poetry, which has been for me an enduring fountain of wisdom and joy. The title for the talk comes from Book 10, Canto 3, The Debate of Love and Death. And there, Savitri replies to Death's argument with this couplet: "O Death, thou speakest truth, but truth that slays. I answer to thee with the truth that saves." Let me begin by giving a little context to the run-up to these lines in the poem as they come near the end of the poem, near its climax. The god Death has taken Savitri's husband, Satyavan, and is leading him towards the black void. And Savitri has gone into a trance and is following in pursuit. Sri Aurobindo beautifully explained the situation near the beginning of the poem in a canto called The Issue. He says there, "On the bare peak where self is alone with naught, and life has no sense, and love no place to stand, she must plead her case upon extinction's verge. In the world's death cave, uphold life's helpless claim, and vindicate her right to be and love." Savitri's debate with death extends over 5 cantos, approximately 100 pages, and the couplet comes about in the middle of this debate. In the remainder of this talk, I'd like to elaborate on the deeper nature of love, on the love which is eternal and can stand up to death, as it is explained in Savitri, in Sri Aurobindo's letters on yoga, and in some of the mother's talks to the children of the ashram school. In his debate with Savitri, Death has been arguing that he is the beginning and end of all things. He has said, "I, Death, am he. There is no other God. All from my depths are born. They live by death. All to my depths return and are no more." In his arguments, Death often voices views on the nature of existence which mankind itself has taken, views which see life as ephemeral, meaningless, and headed inevitably towards death and nothingness. As Savitri says in the couplet, there is a certain truth in it. In our life experience, we're continually witness to death, and it is often difficult to see the point of all the struggle and suffering of life when it appears to end so abruptly. Savitri, however, by this point in the poem, has become conscious of her divine origin, of her eternal existence, and her oneness with all. She has argued, "When I have loved forever, I shall know. Love in me knows the truth all changings mask. I know that knowledge is a vast embrace. I know that every being is myself. In every heart is hidden the myriad one. I know the calm transcendent bears the world, the veiled inhabitant, the silent Lord. I feel his secret act, his intimate fire. I hear the murmur of the cosmic voice. I know my coming was a wave from God, for all his sons were conscient in my birth. And one who loves in us came veiled by death. Then was man born among the monstrous stars, dowered with a mind and heart to conquer thee." Savitri, in her answer to death, follows the couplet mentioned earlier by recounting the long process of evolution, starting from inert matter and culminating in human thought turned toward spiritual experience. She says, "O death, thou lookest on an unfinished world," and explains that the divine is immanent in the world and is gradually manifesting its greater and greater powers. Yes, death is there, long suffering is there, and it may seem meaningless in the short term. But in the long term, there is progress. Consciousness is growing on earth, and eventually the divine will shine through and transform the suffering of life into delight. In the same canto, Savitri says, "At last the soul turns to eternal things. In every shrine it cries for the clasp of God. Then is there played the crowning mystery. Then is achieved the longed-for miracle." And then a little further down on the next page, she says, "A mystic slow transfiguration works. All our earth starts from mud and ends in sky. And love that was once an animal's desire, then a sweet madness in the rapturous heart, an ardent comradeship in the happy mind, becomes a wide spiritual yearning space. A lonely soul passions for the alone. The heart that loved man thrills to the love of God. A body is his chamber and his shrine." Sri Aurobindo, in this short passage, shows us the evolutionary process through which love emerges gradually in the human being, first as an animal desire, then as the emotional heart's love for other human beings, then as a refined mental love and comradeship between human beings, and finally as the soul's passion for the alone, the one and only divine. And then he adds this interesting clause to the end of the sentence: "A body is his chamber and his shrine." The love of which he speaks is not simply love for an abstract, transcendent God beyond the world. The body, an earthly form, is his chamber and shrine. It may be a particular body, a particular human being, whom with our transformed senses we may see as an embodiment of the divine, or it may be all bodies, all forms, the whole world that we see as an embodiment of the divine, a universal shrine or temple in which the immanent divine lives, no longer hidden, but clearly visible to our inner senses. And then in the continuation of this passage, Sri Aurobindo shows us the culminating result of this evolution of love. Then is our being rescued from separateness. All is itself. All is new felt in God. A lover leaning from his cloister's door gathers the whole world into his single breast. Then shall the business fail of night and death. When unity is won, when strife is lost, and all is known, and all is clasped by love, who would turn back to ignorance and pain? One side of the love that saves is the love of the human being, the human soul for the divine. But the other side of the love that saves is the love of the divine for the human being and for the whole world. A lover leaning from his cloister's door gathers the whole world into his single breast. As our love for the divine grows, we also feel the love of the divine for us, helping and fulfilling us in a rapture of conscious delight. The mother clearly describes the relation of these two sides of love in one of her talks at the school. She says, "Through the action of the forces of separation, consciousness became inconscience, and matter was created such as it is, on a basis of inconscience, so total that no contact seemed possible between the origin and what was created. And this total inconscience made a direct descent necessary without passing through the intermediate regions, a direct descent of the divine consciousness in its form of love. And it is this descent of divine love into matter, penetrating it, and adding a new element to its composition, which has made possible the ascent, slow for us, but an uninterrupted ascent, from inconscience to consciousness, and from darkness to light. She explains that it is because of this descent of the divine love into the creation that the creation can evolve, can progress towards reunification with the divine. But in a continuation of the same conversation, she also says that the human beings cannot really tolerate the divine love in its purity. It is too powerful, too intense for human beings to bear. We can only tolerate, only accept a very diminished and obscure form of this love. She explains that nevertheless, the divine love in its form of grace does its work and gradually raises us up towards the divine nature. In one of his letters on yoga, Sri Aurobindo explains that the human consciousness must first be transformed in order to bear and contain the divine love in its intensity. He says that the human being must first have the strength to love the divine alone and turn away from all other ties. But in addition, a new consciousness must be created in the individual, first based on a divine peace established all the way down to the physical. Then on that basis, a pure, unegoistic inner strength. After this, the divine light and knowledge must transform all the consciousness and movements. This last condition implies the need for the supramental transformation, as he stated explicitly in another letter. Only then can the human consciousness contain the divine love and Ananda. Until then, they can only come in touches and brief experiences, but they cannot remain. As human love gradually becomes more purified, it turns to the divine, where it can find its true nature and fulfillment. There is an interesting talk of the mother in which she describes the meeting of the love of the human for the divine with the answering love of the divine. She says, "The creation moves upward through love towards the divine, and in answer there leans downward to meet the creation, the divine love and grace. Love cannot exist in its pure beauty. Love cannot put on its native power and intense joy of fullness until there is this interchange, this fusion between the earth and the supreme, this movement of love from the divine to the creation and from the creation to the divine. This human movement of love is secretly seeking for something else than what it has yet found, but it does not know where to find it. It does not even know what it is. But the moment man's consciousness awakens to the divine love, pure, independent of all manifestations in human forms, he knows for what his heart has all the time been longing. This is the beginning of the soul's aspiration that brings the awakening of the consciousness and its yearning for union with the divine. All the forms that are of the ignorance all the deformations it has imposed must from that moment fade and disappear and give place to one single movement of the creation, answering to the divine love by its love for the divine. Once the creation is conscious, awakened, opened to love for the divine love pours itself without limit back into the creation. The circle of the movement turns back upon itself, and the ends meet. There is the joining of the extremes, supreme spirit and manifesting matter, and their divine union becomes constant and complete. And then she adds something very interesting about the work of the avatar. She says, great beings have taken birth in this world who came to bring down here something of the sovereign purity and power of divine love. The divine love has thrown itself into a personal form in them, that its realization upon earth may be at once more easy and more perfect. Divine love, when manifested in a personal being, is easier to realize. It is more difficult when it is unmanifested or impersonal in its movement. A human being awakened by this personal touch, with this personal intensity to the consciousness of the divine love, will find his work and change made more easy. The union for which he seeks becomes more natural and close. And the union, the realization, will become for him too more full, more perfect. For the wide uniformity of a universal and impersonal love will be lit up and vivified with the color and beauty of all possible relations with the divine. If it were simply that the creation was gradually evolving from darkness towards light, from impure forms of love towards divine love, while being aided in this process by the divine grace, it would not be so difficult. Unfortunately for us, there has cut across this natural progression towards the light, towards divinity, a sinister anti-divine force, which is largely symbolized in the poem by the god Death himself. Sri Aurobindo refers to this deviating power in many places in the poems. It is vividly described in Book 2, Canto 7, The Descent into Night. I'll read just a portion of this description. Then from the somber mystery of the gulfs, and from the hollow bosom of the mask, something crept forth that seemed a shapeless thought. A fatal influence upon creatures stole, whose lethal touch pursued the immortal spirit. On life was laid the haunting finger of death, and overcast with error, grief, and pain, the soul's native will for truth and joy and light. And skipping down a few lines, even light and love, by that cloaked danger's spell, turn from the brilliant nature of the gods to fallen angels and misleading sons, became themselves a danger and a charm, a perverse sweetness, a heaven-born malefice. Its power could deform divinest things. A wind of sorrow breathed upon the world. All thought with falsehood was besieged, all act stamped with defect or vain success. But none could know the reason of his fall. The gray mask whispered, and though no sound was heard, yet in the ignorant heart a seed was sown that bore black fruit of suffering, death, and bale. It is this from which we must be saved. After reading this passage, we cannot say that Sri Aurobindo had his head in the clouds and didn't know or care about the problems faced by human beings in life and in the world. Indeed, as he says of the protagonist, Aswapati, in the lead-up to this passage, he turned to find that wide world failure's cause. Sri Aurobindo had turned his gaze into the heart of darkness in order to find the cause of the problem of life and fix it. Similarly, we who follow Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's teachings must not have our heads in the clouds, but must be aware of the dangers and difficulties through which we move in our path to the divine. We do not need to focus on the dangers and difficulties, but we must be vigilant. We must be aware that they are there, lurking, waiting to trip us up or subtly mislead and influence us. And we must not welcome these undivine influences into our mind and life and acts, but firmly keep them out and keep ourselves open to the light and love towards which we aspire and move. One of the very important letters on yoga that Sri Aurobindo wrote has been titled by the editors of the complete works, The Decisive Ordeal of This Yoga. It's in the 4th volume of the Letters on Yoga, on pages 150 to 156. In it, Sri Aurobindo explains there is a part of the being that resists the divine and the yoga. He says, I mean that part of the vital physical nature, with its petty and obstinate egoism, which actuates the external human personality, that which supports its surface thoughts and dominates its habitual ways of feeling, character, and action. And he says that whatever there may be in the higher parts of the nature, aspiration to the truth, devotion, or the will to conquer the obstacles and the hostile forces, it cannot become integral. It cannot remain unmixed or unspoiled or continue to be effective so long as the lower vital and the external personality have not accepted the light and consented to change. And he continues, it was inevitable that in the course of the sadhana, these inferior parts of the nature should be brought forward in order that, like the rest of the being, they may make the crucial choice and either accept or refuse transformation. My whole work depends upon this movement. It is the decisive ordeal of this yoga. For the physical consciousness and the material life cannot change if this does not change. And in the remainder of that letter, Sri Aurobindo explains the false attitudes of this part of the being, which are several of the major challenges of this yoga. These passages help us to see the difficulty of life and of Sri Aurobindo's yoga in their deeper dimensions. The lower vital and the physical nature obstinately refuse to change or to accept the higher light and the divine into themselves. They obstinately insist on their right to continue in their same egoistic, ignorant, and false attitudes and behaviors. And these vital physical parts of the being are influenced and supported in this obstinacy by dark, anti-divine, and hostile forces. There is another important letter, just 2 pages later, which explains the way out of the lower vital difficulty. It's fairly short, and so I'll read the complete letter. as it appears. He says, the lower vital in most human beings is full of grave defects and of movements that respond to hostile forces. A constant psychic opening, a persistent rejection of these influences, a separation of oneself from all hostile suggestions, and the inflow of the calm, light, peace, purity of the mother's power would eventually free the system from the siege. What is needed is to be quiet and more quiet. To look on these influences as something not yourself which has intruded. To separate yourself from it and deny it, and to abide in a quiet confidence in the divine power. If your psychic being asks for the divine, and your mind is sincere and calls for liberation from the lower nature and from all hostile forces, and if you can call the mother's power into your heart and rely upon it more than on your own strength, the siege will in the end be driven away from you and strength and peace take its place. There is another letter in the same section that adds another crucial point for getting free of these hostile suggestions in the lower vital and physical consciousness. I'll read just the crucial point. He says, inner experiences are helpful to the mind and higher vital for change, but for the lower vital and the outer being, a sadhana of self-discipline is indispensable. The external actions and the spirit in them must change. Your external thoughts and actions must be for the divine only. There must be self-restraint, entire truthfulness, a constant thought of the divine in all you do. This is the way for the change of the lower vital. By your constant self-dedication and self-discipline, the force will be brought down into the external being and the change made. It is only the divine power, the mother's force, that can free the human being from the siege of the hostile forces, which influence and hold sway over the lower vital being and physical nature. However, our constant cooperation with the divine power is required. It's absolutely essential, and it's the decisive ordeal of the yoga. The difficult work of the avatar, of the divine born into a human body in order to raise the human race towards the divine, is poignantly described in Book 6, Canto 2, The Way of Fate and the Problem of Pain. Sri Aurobindo says, hard is the world redeemer's heavy task. The world itself becomes his adversary. Those he would save are his antagonists. This world is in love with its own ignorance. Its darkness turns away from the Savior light. It gives the cross in payment for the crown. He must call light into its dark abysms, else never can truth conquer matter's sleep, and all earth look into the eyes of God. All things obscure his knowledge must relume. All things perverse his power must unknot. He must pass to the other shore of falsehood's sea. He must enter the world's dark to bring their light. The heart of evil must be bared to his eyes. He must learn its cosmic dark necessity, its right, and its dire roots in nature's soil. He must know the thought that moves the demon act and justifies the Titan's erring pride and the falsehood lurking in earth's crooked dreams. He must enter the eternity of night and know God's darkness as he knows his sun. For this he must go down into the pit. For this he must invade the dolorous vast, imperishable and wise and infinite. He still must travel hell, the world to save. We don't usually think of the suffering that, out of their love, Sri Aurobindo and the mother bore for us. Still, it's probably good to be reminded of it from time to time, so that some glimmer of that awareness might melt our hearts a little and enable us to return some measure of true love in return. Sri Aurobindo wrote about this suffering poignantly in Savitri and in some of his other poems, such as A God's Labor. The mother helped us to remember it when she wrote that message, which is on the Samadhi in the ashram. I think it is useful from time to time when we visit the Samadhi to read it. And those who have read Mother's Agenda may also remember some of the very heart-rending passages that spoke of the terrible suffering that the mother bore in her work for the transformation of the body. Sometimes people would question Sri Aurobindo whether it was really possible for an avatar to experience suffering, since the divine consciousness was in them. He explained, there are two sides of the phenomenon of avatarhood, the divine consciousness behind and the instrumental personality. The divine consciousness is omnipotent, but it has put forth the instrumental personality in nature, under the conditions of nature, and it uses it according to the rules of the game, though also sometimes to change the rules of the game. And in another letter he writes, the divine does not need to suffer or struggle for himself. If he takes on these things, it is in order to bear the world burden and help the world and men. And if the sufferings and struggles are to be of any help, they must be real. A sham or falsehood cannot help. They must be as real as the struggles and sufferings of men themselves. The divine bears them, and at the same time shows the way out of them. Otherwise, his assumption of human nature has no meaning and no utility and no value. Sri Aurobindo and the mother, out of their love for us, bore a great struggle and suffering for humanity. But for what purpose? What inner work did their struggle accomplish for us? In Book 2, Canto 8, Sri Aurobindo describes Aswapati going down into the deepest recesses of the subconscious. He says, there in the slumber of the cosmic will, he saw the secret key of nature's change. A light was with him, an invisible hand was laid upon the error and the pain, till it became a quivering ecstasy, the shock and sweetness of an arm's embrace. And a little bit further down, hell split across its huge abrupt facade, as if a magic building were undone. Night opened and vanished like a gulf of dream. Into being's gap scooped out as empty space, in which he had filled the place of absent God, there poured a wide, intimate, and blissful dawn. Healed were all things that time's torn heart had made, and sorrow could live no more in nature's breast. Division ceased to be, for God was there. The soul lit the conscious body with its ray. Matter and spirit mingled and were one. The main work for which Sri Aurobindo and the Mother came was to bring down the supramental consciousness, the truth consciousness, into the evolving consciousness on earth. For this, they had themselves to go down into the lowest, most obscure levels of consciousness to bring that supramental consciousness down there. The Mother explained that on the 29th of February, 1956, the supramental descended into the earth consciousness, effectively fulfilling Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's primary work. In Book 11 of Savitri, we perhaps have the best description of what the supramental world is like, both in its own plane and what it will make of earth. Regarding what will happen on earth, Sri Aurobindo writes, "The incarnate dual power shall open God's door. Eternal supermind shall wake in mortal man and manifest the hidden demigod, or grow into the God-light and God-force, revealing the secret deity in the cave. Then shall the earth be touched by the Supreme. His bright unveiled transcendence shall illumine the mind and heart, and force the life and act to interpret his inexpressible mystery in a heavenly alphabet of divinity's signs." And a little further down on the next page, "The supermind shall be his nature's fount. The Eternal's truth shall mold his thoughts and acts. The Eternal's truth shall be his light and guide. All then shall change. A magic order come, overtopping this mechanical universe. A mightier race shall inhabit the mortal's world. On nature's luminous tops, on the spirit's ground, the Superman shall reign as king of life. Make earth almost the mate and peer of heaven, and lead towards God in truth man's ignorant heart, and lift towards Godhead his mortality." The supermind has the power of immortality, and in the poem, Savitri ascends into the supramental plane in Book 11, and finally rescues Satyavan from death and brings him back to life. But after the descent of the supermind into the Earth's atmosphere in 1956, there was no obvious visible change for humanity, though the Mother herself was aware of changes that were taking place within her own physical consciousness and in the world, which she described in some of her talks in the school and in many of her conversations with Sat Prem and Mother's Agenda. Sri Aurobindo had already written much earlier in the Letters on Yoga, "What we are doing, if and when we succeed, will be a beginning, not a completion. It is the foundation of a new consciousness on earth, a consciousness with infinite possibilities of manifestation. The eternal progression is in the manifestation, and beyond there is no progression. It is not intended to supramentalize humanity at large, but to establish the principle of the supramental consciousness in the earth evolution. If that is done, all that is needed will be evolved by the supramental power itself. It is not, therefore, important that the mission should be widespread. What is important is that the thing should be done at all, in however small a number. That is the only difficulty." And in another letter, he further elaborates. The descent of the supramental means only that the power will be there in the earth consciousness as a living force, just as the thinking mental and the higher mental are already there. But an animal cannot take advantage of the presence of the thinking mental power, or an undeveloped man of the presence of the higher mental power. So too everybody will not be able to take advantage of the presence of the supramental power. I have also often enough said that it will be at first for the few. Only there will be a growing influence of it on the earth. In 1957, the mother explained that it would take some time for the effects of the supramental descent to be plainly visible, and what sadhaks and humanity in general must do to prepare themselves to see and experience it. Although I'll read just a small portion of this letter, it's still a bit long, but it is worth listening to because it's very important and powerful, and it will bring us to our conclusion. She says, "How long it will take is difficult to foresee. It will depend a great deal on the goodwill and the receptivity of a certain number of people. For the individual always advances faster than the collectivity, and by its very nature, humanity is destined to manifest the supermind before the rest of creation. What is indispensable in every case is the ardent will for progress, the willing and joyful renunciation of all that hampers the advance, to throw far away from oneself all that prevents one from going forward, and to set out into the unknown with the ardent faith that this is the truth of tomorrow, inevitable, which must necessarily come, which nothing, nobody, no bad will, not even nature, can prevent from becoming a reality, perhaps of a not too distant future, a reality which is being worked out now, and which those who know how to change, how not to be weighed down by old habits, will surely have the good fortune not only to see, but to realize. People sleep, they forget, they take life easy, they forget all the time. But if we could remember that we are at an exceptional hour, a unique time, that we have this immense good fortune, this invaluable privilege of being present at the birth of a new world, we could easily get rid of everything that impedes and hinders our progress. So the most important thing, it seems, is to remember this fact, even when one doesn't have the tangible experience, to have the certainty of it and faith in it, to remember always, to recall it constantly, to go to sleep with this idea, to wake up with this perception, to do all that one does with this great truth as the background, as a constant support, this great truth that we are witnessing the birth of a new world. We can participate in it. We can become this new world. And truly, when one has such a marvelous opportunity, one should be ready to give up everything for its sake. So to conclude, out of their divine love for humanity and the earth, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother descended into the lowest depths of the subconscient battled with the hostile forces and suffered their attacks, in order to bring down the supramental consciousness into the earth consciousness and into the physical body. However, in order for us to individually experience that supramental consciousness and feel its effects, we must first become ready. One of the most important signs of that readiness, and one of the most effective means towards it, is a deep, intense, integral, and constant love for the divine, for Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and for their work in establishing a pure and outwardly visible manifestation of the divine consciousness, love, and Ananda on the earth and in us. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, for sharing with us these insights, these inspiring insights, I think, and perhaps encouraging us to make the necessary efforts to move forward, following in the footsteps of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, who have done so much for the world, for all of us. Thank you. I want to hand over a little memento. Memento of the occasion.
Thank you so much.
Also to Mrs. Natkani. I learned just before the talk that you are missing some of the volumes of English of Savitri. So I think here you will find the completion of your collection. It's quite heavy, so somebody else will have to carry these. And we have these flowers. Attachment for the divine. Beautiful. We're so happy that you could be with us today. And, we hope to remember.
Thank you, Larry.
It's nice to have you.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother.